And breaking tonight, more trouble on the streets of Britain, this time in the heart of Westminster, as protesters clashed with riot police outside Downing Street. Crowds have been heard chanting "Save our kids" and "Stop the boats" in central London, and we've also seen protesters attempt to kick down fences. The Met Police have placed strict conditions on the "Enough is enough" protest. Well, I'm joined now by GBNews star Martin Daubney, who was at the protest and ended up in handcuffs. Take a look.
I'm jealous of GBNews. I'm jealous of GBNews. No, I'm doing my job. Seriously, I'm jealous of GBNews. I work around the corner.
Conditions have been put
I'm
in
in
place.
cell every day, 3 till 6 p.m. You can't seriously. So what's happened? I'm jealous of GBNews recording footage. What's the name? I'm Martin Daubney. I'm jealous of GBNews.
Now, Martin, I know that you prefer handcuffs recreationally, so what happened today?
So I work in Westminster, as you know, for GBNews, and on my way home to the Underground is the Cenotaph. So I walked down there and I saw a sizable protest of people that were shouting all the things you just mentioned. We want our country back, enough is enough, save our kids. And as a journalist, I often go down there and film these protests. And I was just stood right by the Cenotaph filming it. And a few bottles were getting thrown. I saw about 4 or 5 arrests. And a female officer came towards me and she slapped her cuff on my right hand and pulled it behind my back. And I've got to say, Mark, they were absolutely fine about it. I explained that I was working as a journalist. I work at GBNews. And a senior officer came over and said, yeah, we know who Martin is. I go to quite a few of these things in my capacity as a journalist, and they quickly uncuffed me, and I carried on filming. So there was a huge frustration on the streets. But I'll say this, Mark, I understand people's frustration, but I wonder if bottling coppers in London is the proportionate reaction to what we're seeing on the streets of Southport, Southend, and the rest of it. So I've got to say there was huge frustration. You can see there that's me just getting cuffed by the copper. She was saying that there's a displacement order around here, you're not allowed to be here. I explained to her I was a journalist, I explained I worked at GBNews, and it was over very quickly. I don't know, over-dramatise this, I was just doing my job as a journalist, and they were very fair and very reasonable with me.
OK, do you think, though, there was evidence of two-tier policing in what happened in central London, perhaps compared to what happened in Southport last night? And
well, I've been on lots of these protests. I was at the Cenotaph protest when coppers were putting the baton into the lads there. There's footage again of me restraining one of the fellas there. He was about to get a severe kicking. I pulled him back, and I think I did him a favour. In fact, his daughter messaged me, said, "Thank you, Martin, for saving my father from what could have been a far worse fate." But on the other hand, Mark, I do understand the deep frustration that British people feel with policing, two-tier policing. I've been to the protests for the pro-Palestine mob, and there is definitely a feeling that they stand off and soft-soak them. I went to one of those protests before, again, footage on GBNews. I was egged, I was harangued, I was kind of chased away, I had fluid thrown over me, again, in my capacity as a reporter, as a journalist. I would argue that there is a distinct feeling with a lot of justification that we see two-tier policing. Tonight, for example, I've got footage of a huge wall of police. There we go. I sent that through earlier, of riot police in the full tackle, kettling, walking people down the street. And we don't see that kind of footage, for example, in Hare Hills. We don't see that when there is a different protest type.
Definitely,
so
and we also didn't, to interrupt you, we didn't see it at those weekly so-called peace marches in which people were waving banners saying Intifada, which means suicide bombs on buses, or from the river to the sea, which means wiping out Israel. Martin, briefly, if you can, this protest was based around sort of the mantra of enough is enough and save our kids. In a line or two, what exactly was the protest about?
The protest was precisely about the incident in Southport, the feeling that there is two-tier policing, the feeling that British people aren't being listened to, and all of this spills over. And Mark, they need to start listening sharpish. These kind of protests won't go away. And most people there were peaceful. They don't want trouble, but they want to be listened to, and we've got to start listening very, very quickly.
Absolutely. Well, if you want to save our kids, you should probably head down to the BBC. My thanks to Martin Daubney, brilliant GB News star, who, of course, is back tomorrow at 3 o'clock, 3 till 6. What a brilliant broadcaster. And it turns out a pretty brave guy who was handcuffed by cops this afternoon, simply passing through a Westminster protest.